This is the cockpit. I got 217 miles on it, and actually since I rebuilt the engine, just 17,000. This guy here, I don't know about my focus, it doesn't seem to want to work. Here's my fuel pressure gauge, and I have a switch over here that I'll show you then, and then it switches to oil with the flip of a switch. Here is my vacuum boost. It maxes out at 15, but I'm actually closer to 19. This came with the Garrett, I think it's a 2760 ceramic ball bearing turbo, and there's a probe inside the turbo, and it rotates, it counts the revolutions of the turbine. Down here is another part of it, is my center console area. This guy here turns on my headlights, and when I stop the engine, it puts it in a cool down mode. This guy here turns on the rear view camera, which I have on now, and then this is down is oil and up is fuel. Here is my voltmeter, and I have a sump pump for my turbo that gives me the amperage, so it lets me know that my sump pump's working. My wideband air fuel ratio, and I took out the computer and just put a digital clock in there. Down here is my stereo control unit, which is mounted underneath the driver's seat, and inside of here, which you really can't see, is the Sirius radio that's wired in. Moving down the center console, I put leather around the plastic all the way back. I'll show you the leather interior here in a minute. I'm about ready to start the car. I have a mega squirt set up. So let me go ahead and start the car. It's a cold start. Make sure it's in neutral. And then when I flip that switch I showed you, there's my fuel pressure, 43 pounds. And when I flip it again, there's my oil pressure at startup. And then here's my oil pressure going into the current required to run my sump pump, which I'll show you then. Try not to move too fast. There's my mega squirt system. If you just want a video on how I'd set that up, it's still warming up, let me know. And right now I'm at 14.2 on the wideband, and if you look at my air fuel ratio, it's at 14.2 as well. The air conditioner works. I have it on now. I'll turn it off. Here's my backup camera, on, off. When I have the top up, it's easier to back out. I got a little bit of a tear on the dash, but I figure when I replace the windshield anytime, maybe I'll get a new dash for it. Otherwise, I'll leave it alone. So I got speakers in the door, both sides. So there's the low beams. let me go put the high beams on like everybody does. And there, I'm so used to just doing it. And if you notice, the inside ones are high beams too. So the inside ones are the low beams and the high beams. Now if you notice, the other out ones didn't come on yet. Now when I'm out in the country, over here where I use for my timer, I have a switch right here. So I'll flip this up. Right now the high beams are on. You can see, I don't know if you can see the blue light on. So when I'm out in the country driving, all 4 lights come on. Now I'm going to shift it to the low beams out in the country driving. There you go. Then when I'm out in the country driving, all 4 LED bulbs come on. When I go into the city, so I don't get harassed with the police, I'll just come over here, shut this switch off, and now it's just regular high-low beams like it's designed for. And then let me turn the switch off. Alright, I'm going to move it out back. Be back in a second, or a few minutes, seconds for you. Here's my stereo working. And I'm a volume control here. Should I stay or should I go? When I designed this, I designed it not for loud noise. I designed it so I can listen to my stereo system. But I did put a little bit of an exhaust on it, a MagnaFlow. So I'll start from the front, work my way to the back. I'll do the outside first. So I have a jimmy lip down below. The rubber molding, that's all new. Mako painted the body. I didn't want to spend $7,000 for the paint job. He did a nice job. This here is my the hookup to my battery. Trickle charge it. So when it's sitting, you know, which it will during the winter, I can just hook that up. I got all new molding. I had to go to Europe for most of the molding. I got the last of it in the world for the trim here. Took me forever to find that. And then I messed up when I got them from Tire Rack. I didn't realize I could get the hubs later. You know, the centerpiece. Then I go to order the centerpiece. They don't make them for this style rim, so I have to live with it. Using a water methanol injection. I'll show that to you in a bit. I have new lenses down there for the sides. New bulbs in there. This came off a IS. Mako painted it for me with that rubber stuff. Here's my backup camera. There's the exhaust right there. It's a MagnaFlow. The rear end was rebuilt. But I mean, everything you're seeing here I did. So I put new brakes on it, new brake dust covers, the wheel bearings. What I did was I bought that $500 tool to pound them out, because when it's on jacks and you want to put the wheel bearings on, it ain't like you can take it somewhere. So I bought the tool to do the wheel bearings front and rear, and then I sold the tool when I was done with it. You know, knocked it down $100 for the next person to use. You can see the new molding. And this is supposed to be like the last Jimmy lip there was that I put in there. And you notice I don't have no fog lights on it because I don't really need it with my 4 lights. Those lights, if you're going to go with the LEDs, you can't use the American bulbs. They don't fit the GTX LED harness, you know, where my battery keeps dying. That's my 3rd battery, that's why it dies. Here's the doors. I had the door cards off, cleaned them. I got sound deadening behind there. For the carpet, some guy had said on Amazon he used this a speaker cloth for the subwoofers for the interior. That's what I did. But underneath there's like 5 coats of sound deadening. And then I had to cut where the drive shaft goes through because I put an E30 drive rack and pinion on it. And to do that, I had to, because this is an airbag, I had to cut the angle for it to line up. While I was working on the car, I kept looking for new foam as I came across new old stock on eBay. So everything you see in here is all new foam. And then at Black Friday, I couldn't get any deals on the leather. Finally got 10% off. This is Italian leather, and then this is like that rubber stuff, which was good because it's just easier to stretch with the heat gun than if I would have got the leather to put on it. So I put the seats in. We did the shocks down below. You can see the new leather that I put on the center console. The heaters work. There's a picture of it in the back. That's where my grandson sits. I'll go over to the other side. I got a new top on it, which I did. I put a new top on it myself. And then I did all the rubber to it. I won't get the top out unless, it's a top. And then down below here, managed to put a cup holder in there. And like I said, this is a short throw 5-speed. It's got a Lightning flywheel on it. This was originally an automatic. When I went to start the car, here the automatic was bad. And I'm like, damn. I wish I would have known that before I put it. This car sat for like 16 years at some guy's yard, and on a community yard sale he happened to be out. I said, hey, you're selling it? So he sold me the car for $1,000. Let me go ahead and pop the hood up. For $1,000, the paint was all shot. All the rubber, if you can imagine, from the UV rays was killing it all. Remember I was talking about my fan to cool the turbo down when I turn off the engine? So that runs that. And then I got that little sensor sitting on top of the radiator with JB Weld. There's a temperature switch. When it hits that temperature, it puts a ground on it. And I have it wired to the front fan. Naturally, they're out with. I had to put tie wraps to keep the turbo from. The neighbor through those trees is weed whacking. There's multiple aspects of this engine I'm going to show you. I already showed you the fan control that it turns on the air conditioner fan. I'll start with the intake where it comes off the valve cover and it comes into here for the emissions. So on the normal vacuum, like when my vacuum gauge is on, I have a blow off, a one-way valve here. It'll suck open and it'll draw the vacuum and take the emissions out of the engine and reburn it. But then when I come in with the turbo is pushing air that way, and it shuts off that valve. So now I'm not going to pressurize my valve cover. And let me come around to the other side. It's kind of hard to see, but you can imagine it. There's a T here. Oh, looks like did I block it off? Oh, here, yep. I actually blocked it off and just went from here right into my wastegate. Don't recall doing that, but apparently I did. Over here, let's look at the ignition. I kept the old cup on it for dust. Mega Squirt allows me to do a wasted spark application, which I have set up here. And over here, down in here, is where the temperature sensor is for the turn on the fan when it overheats. But this part of the radiator, I hit it with the thermal gun. Only went up to like 186. Whereas my engine block, when I was hitting that, was at what, like 200. So what I ended up doing with this goes into the temperature engine, goes into the Mega Squirt, what you've seen. Well, I took an output from that. When it gets to 212, there's a hysteresis loop. It'll send out 12 volts. And now it'll turn on the fan high and low in place of that unit. So I kind of like bypassed it. On the turbo setup, if you notice, there's no turbo intercooler. Either you get air conditioning or you get a turbo intercooler. You can't have both. So I went with the air conditioning. And down below you can't see it, but I actually replaced the oil cooler. The engine itself is a 2.7 liter block. The 2.5 liter block, if you look at the compression, is like 11:1. You can't turbocharge that. The 2.7 liter is a 9:1 compression. So it gives you it's a stroker engine, and you can actually turbocharge it. So the way it works for turbocharging is, this is my Garrett, I think it's a 2760. What I had to do was, you have to design these turbos. Everybody just put a turbo on it, and then at 5,000 RPMs it kicks in, and then next thing you know, the turbo shuts off. When I designed this engine with the turbo, I wanted 125 horsepower at 2,700 RPMs and 300 horsepower at 6,000 RPMs. What you do then is you go to the Garrett website, and they have these maps, and you got to calculate all these mathematical equations, and you start putting the points on the islands. And after 8 maps, I found a turbo that matches my specification, and that's how I ended up with this turbo. It's got a oil cool and water cool, and I have everything heat wrapped. Even down in here, everything's heat wrapped. So when it comes out of the turbo, I was having troubles with the gravity feed back into the crank. What I ended up doing was, it comes out of here and it comes down to this pump right here. I don't know if you can really see it, but this here is a pump, and that's that. Remember I showed you that? I still have the radiator that was for automatic transmission. I have no issues with coolant. Still have the regular fan. I didn't do any kind of electronic fan upgrades. Left that all stock. Here is the oil filter for the turbo. So there's an inline oil filter for that. This here is my oil pressure gauge. Remember I showed you that gauge with the switch. I could switch between the fuel pressure and the oil pressure. So here's my oil pressure. I have a relay underneath the console that it's a triple pole, triple throw, and then I throw the ground either way. So that turns on that guy, and I'll show you the fuel pressure gauge. So here's the electronic fuel pressure gauge right in there, and it's kind of hard to see, but there's a wire there also for the sensor. I forgot to show that. Here's one of the modules for the GTR LED high-low beams. So they all got wired in. Here's one light. Here's the other light, and then naturally there's two more. And I wired them all the way back over to there. What I did was, when I wired in the reason I had to go with a Mega Squirt, the original Bosch has a 12 psi fuel injector. So on cold starts, the Bosch knows that it's a 12 psi. So on cold start, it puts the fuel injectors wide open to start the car. Well, now I'm at 24 psi fuel injector. So when I start the car at cold, the Bosch would have opened up the fuel injectors thinking it was 12, and it was flooding my cylinders with fuel, and then I get the fuel to go down between the cylinders into the oil pan. So that's why I had to get rid of the original. Now what I did was, for the fuel injectors and the crankcase sensor, all the electronic stuff that's wired from the original engine, I kept that wiring harness, and up under the dash where it goes into the original Bosch sensor, like for the fuel injectors, they told me what pin it was. I would cut those and then reroute them into my Mega Squirt, and that's what I did. So even though you see a lot of wires in here, the wiring for the fuel injection, the alternator, the starter, the sensor for the oh, my brain's getting down. On the connecting, on the crankcase sensor, sorry about that. I'm an electrical engineer, never went to automotive school, so you have to bear with me. Over here is the 12-volt battery takeoff, and the white wire here, remember I showed you where it comes in to charge the battery. It comes down here, the alternator comes into here, and it goes over there. I'll show that to you in a bit. I had to move my windshield washer fluid over there. I have a pump on it. I had to redo my ground. And in here, should mention also, if you look in here, this white stuff, that's all fiberglass. I don't want my turbo to heat my hood up, so I packed that all in there with fiberglass. Because the turbo is sitting right here, so that protects my hood. What I did in here was, if you recall, on the original system, sitting right here was a coil with a green wire, and that green wire went through the key switch for start and run. Well, I took that wire and I hooked it up to the starter coil. That way all this electronics is not going through my key switch. So I have this all wired up off of here. It comes off of here. This is 12-volt accessory wires. Over there's a 12-volt battery. Down in here is a fuse block. You really can't see it, but it's in there. And down in there is the electronic module. I don't know if you can see it in there. It's where that C is. It's kind of, that's the preamp to charge up the wasted spark coils. And then this guy here is the amp meter that I showed you. The relays for the high and low beams. For the air conditioner, remember I had the wire coming out of the Mega Squirt to turn on the fan when it gets hot. So I took care of that. Everything's wrapped. Everything's wrapped down there. Everything's wrapped going underneath to the back. I can't show that to you. It's got all, you can't see the rebuilt E30 rack and pinion steering in it. I got rid of the original one. They say those drive like a tank, so I had it apart. The cross member That's been reinforced. My battery tray here, naturally I needed this space to get all my wires in and out of the car, so I had to move the battery to the trunk. But the battery tray was rotted. My friend, I bought a new battery tray off BMW, and he welded it in for me. I'm sure there's more in here to show you, but I just don't recall what everything is. Two other things I should mention. This hose used to go back into the inlet, remember? So I brought it out here, and I noticed that this had a one-way valve on it for vacuum going down to the boost cage. So what I ended up doing was putting a one-way valve on that too, and just letting it breathe out naturally. But that way it's just a one-way valve. It's got a new master cylinder on it. Everybody's out mowing. Here's the water methanol injection in here. And here's the ignition air temperature sensor. So you gotta wrap them, otherwise you get that heat soak issue. My neighbor's out mowing the backyard. Everybody's mowing. I waited 6 years to make this video. One thing I forgot to show you in here was the auto defrost for the back. And have you ever noticed on most of the convertibles that have that feature, when you come back here where the defrost vent is, the rubber in here, the leather gets really torn open. So down behind here I put a module in there, and the module is a timer. For 2 minutes it turns on the heat, 2 minutes it shuts it off, and it cycles out 5 times. So after 10 minutes it'll shut down totally in case I forget. And then naturally, I'll show you the rest of it. Naturally, if I need to redo it, then I'll just turn it off and turn it back on, and then it recycles itself. I want to show you the trunk. And this is all new molding down in here. Underneath, the fuel tank was out. The brake line was replaced. The fuel lines are replaced. The brake lines are replaced. The fuel tank was dropped. That was cleaned out. It's got a new fuel pump in it. New hoses up to the fuel inlet. So here's my trunk. Now inside the trunk here, there used to be a BMW amplifier right there, and that amplifier ran. Got the old lamp and put in my JL audio 8-channel. Now every speaker in the car has its own speaker wire. Now if you know anything about speakers, they always have a capacitor for the high filter, mid-range to block off the high, yada yada. When they ended, I took those all out, and I put this in here, this JL Audio TWIK, and that does the bandpass for you digitally. If I said that right, so you don't need the capacitors. Like for the tweeter, you tell the tweeter to kick in at 12K to 20K, and it does it. You don't need that. This is a shallow box subwoofer. I have 2 of them, but I don't have it behind. I designed it, the width of it, to fit behind the seat. But my grandson's always with me. These used to be MB Quartz speaker boxes, and I had the cabinet maker cut them down to make speakers for me. And the other neat thing about this guy is you measure the distance from each tweeter, mid-range, woofer to where you sit. You put the distance in there, kind of like the home stereos, and that brings the sound system directly to you in the front of the car. So it puts the sound stage right in front of you. Behind that is my Performance Snow water methanol injection system. Now because of this, I don't need to do the air intercooler. If you ever have to turn on the water faucet, outside, and you have it in a mist and you run underneath it, it's cool. Well, that's what this does. over there where I showed you where to my phone overheats and it shuts me down because of the temperature. It's a Sony, in 21 minutes or so it overheats. This guy here is a valve that you need for mounting the snow performance in the trunk. It keeps the engine, the intake. Oh, so anyway, so when the turbo hot air blows through that mist, it cools down my intake for me, which cools it down. And also the water methanol adds an octane rating, I think I said that right, to it. So the methanol gives me the a higher octane rating. Comes out of there and it comes down into this hose right here, and I got a filter there for it. And then here's my can, and then I have that. Remember, if you remember right, I have a sensor in there to show when I'm out of water methanol, which just blue windshield washer fluid, the winter stuff. And then where I put my battery, I put it back here. This unit here I don't really use anymore, but it's supposed to get hooked up to the B+, and then you hook your B+, your engine wire up to this. So if the battery drops below 11.75 volts, this relay opens up and keeps your battery from discharging further. But since I have that trickle charge hooked up, I don't use it anymore. So I ran the wires back, and if you notice, there's just one, and then the other one goes to my snow performance. Also, you really can't see it, I don't know where they're at, but my anti-sway bars in here somewhere, they're bolted to the frame. I actually have the sway bars with a kit bolting up into the frame itself. You really can't see much underneath, but I'll show you what I have. I did all this on my back. Here's the Mega Flow. It goes all the way back. When I had the rear end out, I have all new bushings in here. Some are polyester and some are rubber, but like on the drive shaft, you see if you look closely, it's measured, it says left. That used to be the original left one. I didn't want to get aftermarket drive shafts, so I reused them, and then I rotated the left to the right, because I figured for 200,000 miles it spun in one direction. I'll turn them around and let them spin in the other direction. You can see the new brake hoses going into it. Those are touring, Blyston touring suspension. The roads are so bad around here, I didn't want the sports suspension. I like my comfort. And then I had the rear end out. Put new rubber bushings all through there. I went with the rubber bushings. But then on the rear end, I put a poly bushing on the rear end to keep that tight. And then on the transmission I use rubber ones. The engines I use poly. Because you got to remember, when you use poly everywhere, all those vibrations are going to come up through your car. After 6 years I took out the carpet for the trunk. Maybe I'll put it in. Getting ready to open up the swimming pool and work on bikes, and when I was looking for everything, I pulled them off and took them out. Over here is the hardtop for it, which I use, and in here somewhere, I don't know where they're at, but I forgot I actually redid the tumblers for the keys. I took all the keys out and redid the tumblers. They're in here somewhere, the old ones. Oh, and then when I had the clutch out, this is what the the clutch throw-out bearing goes on. I didn't know if this was worn or not, but since I had it out, I figured I'd go ahead and replace it. I got like the last one in the world, and I figured if I don't do it now, in 5 years, if I ever do a clutch, these may not be available anymore. Anyway, and here's when I was working on that fan in the back. What I tried to do was put all new parts on the vehicle now, well, I could still get them. A lot of the stuff I got the very last one of everything. So now the car is like brand new. I have like, I want to say, I lost track at $60,000 in parts. And then you put my labor into it, and that adds up to 6 years of labor. Now my labor was, put the top on it, so you can see how it looks with the top. All the rubber in here is all new. I put all new rubber in it. And then underneath I put the new straps. Probably got the last of the straps too. You can't get the straps anymore. I'll give you one more walk around. I didn't show you like the cross member I put down below, and then show you the new rack and pinion steering that I put in, off the E30. There's a Lighten M5 clutch in there, short throw shifter. I had to take out the pedals, set it up for a 5-speed with the clutch. If you ever replace your power steering fan, because the car is going to hold it while I start it so you can hear it. It's exhausted, so I have to do it again. Still in, I just started it cold, so that's my fast idle you're hearing, but I'll flip it. I flipped it. I normally don't do that when it's cold, but for the video I did. My daughter's gonna film it while we go for a ride. Let me turn off the stereo. So you can see the oil pressure there. Then I'll flip it. There's my fuel. My vacuum is at 14. My alternator is putting out 13.9 volts. And my air fuel ratio is at 13.39. It fluctuates a little bit. If you notice, I got the air conditioning in right now. Yeah, that's why today's a good day for it. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm up here in Reading, Pennsylvania. I'm going to shut it down. We're going to go to that one place where I always used to drive it to tune the Make a Squirt. I can open it up in third gear. It says record.
It's record.
Does it say record?
Yeah.
All right. So we're just in the development here where it's 25 miles an hour. Yeah, we started. I'm still working on the closed loop. I don't know if you know the difference between closed loop and open loop. So when I put on the air conditioner, it puts a load on the engine. And you can see it wants to stall it. Let me turn this off. Now there's a setting in the Mega Squirt is for RPM increase when the air conditioner is on. So I'm going to wire that in to the Mega Squirt. It'll put a ground on that pin and Mega Squirt, and then I'll be able to increase my air conditioning RPMs so it idles properly. stop for now.
Recording.
Let me roll up the windows so the road noise. That's why I have the top up. That was only the second time I put on the air conditioner. It works fine in open loop. 6 years I fought with that closed loop system, which is in closed loop right now. So I got an open loop, no resistors at 1100 RPMs. Alright, here's my stretch. You can show them. And then bring it back down. As soon as we get out of this, I'm in third gear. As soon as we get out of this, over this bridge. I'm at 3,500 RPMs in third gear. Now I designed the boost to come on at like 25, so I'll come down to where the boost is supposed to start. Right about here, this is when I'm on boost. I got it backing down as my strip is done. Now we're third and fourth gear. Turn around here and take it out of the lap. Here comes a wait for this car in case it's going to turn. I want to spin a UE here. Yep, okay. That's good. Turn it off now. That wraps it up. There's my project. If you notice one thing, it's stock. My goal was to keep it looking stock. If you pull off that turbo, pop that hood with the turbo off, you would think that the engine's stock too. When I come up to the Honda Civics and stuff, they have no idea what's sitting underneath that hood. So take care, enjoy. Oh, and you can hear the fan turning on for cool down. Remember that switch I showed you? So that turns the fan on, and then I have a way of turning it off. So when I turn off the engine, that sucks the heat out of the turbo until the radiator cools it down. And then when the temperature gets hot, it turns on the fan. Once the temperature of that switch, like you hear it, drops below 130 degrees, then the fan turns off. And it might turn on again as the water gets hot again. So I did that instead of a 10-minute timer.